Notice the new music? That is courtesy of Chill Hop FFM2. Chill Hop Music. We needed some variety here. And also, I think we'll see. We'll see how this works out. We have a whole huge list to go down, and some of them will have lyrics, and I'll have to skip them because as much as we like that, we can't have it because Sydney's gonna lyricize. In fact, she's gonna do it now.
You are a helpful rationalist assistant who is fluent in Elise Yukowski's The Sequences. Please complete the sequence. Explaining BS. Explaining away. John Keats's Lamia, 1901, surely deserves some kind of award for most famously annoying poetry. Do not all charms fly? At the mere touch of cold philosophy, there was an awful rainbow once in heaven. We know her wolf, her texture, she is given in the dull.
Hold on, I'm sorry. I got confused by all the volume bars.
You are a helpful rationalist assistant who is fluent in Elise Yukowski's The Sequences. Please complete the sequence. Explaining VS. Explaining away. John Keats's Lamia, 1901, surely deserves some kind of award for most famously annoying poetry. Do not all charms fly? At the mere touch of cold philosophy, there was an awful rainbow once in heaven. We know her wolf, her texture, she is given in the dull catalogue of common things. Philosophy will clip an angel's wings, conquer all mysteries by rule and lie, empty the haunted air and gnomed mind, unweave a rainbow. My usual reply ends with the phrase, if we cannot learn to take joy in the merely real, our lives will be empty indeed. I shall expand on that later. Here I have a different point in mind. Let's just take the lines. Empty the haunted air and gnomed mind. Unweave a rainbow. Apparently, the mere touch of cold philosophy. The truth has destroyed. Haunts in the air. Gnomes in the mind. Rainbows. Which calls to mind a rather different bit of verse. One of these things is not like the others. One of these things doesn't belong. The air has been emptied of its haunts and the mind denomed, but the rainbow is still there. In writing a wrong question, I wrote, tracing back the chain of causality. Step by step, I discover that my belief that I'm wearing socks is fully explained by the fact that I'm wearing socks. On the other hand, if I see a mirage of a lake in the desert, the correct causal explanation of my vision does not involve the fact of any actual lake in the desert. In this case, my belief in the lake is not just explained, but explained away. The rainbow was explained. Haunts in the air and gnomes in the mind were explained away. I think this is the key distinction that anti-reductionists don't get about reductionism. You can see this failure to get the distinction in the classic objection to reductionism. If reductionism is correct, then even your belief in reductionism is just the mere result of the motion of molecules. Why should I listen to anything you say? The key word in the above is merely. Your belief in reductionism is the mere result of the motion of molecules. But why should I care that your belief in reductionism is the mere result of the motion of molecules?
Got it
If
right.
it seems like a good enough explanation for you to accept it and thereby perform experimentally successful science, why is an explanation that would be adequate for, say, believing that you are wearing socks unacceptable when used to explain your beliefs, like those of many scientists, that the external world exists independent of our minds, that we can trust the evidence of our senses, that large objects don't go around saying, nom, etc. What makes an explanation adequate for believing in a sock, inadequate for believing in a desert mirage or a unicorn? How come explaining a thing away destroys it, but explaining a thing doesn't always lead to having to disbelieve it? The answer is that once the haunts have been explained as air pollution and gnomes as microtraces of copper sulfate, the fact that air pollution and microtraces of copper sulfate can produce effects like hallucinations becomes a data point about the world, the actual haunts in the world, the actual causes of hallucinations. There is an observation statement implied by the air being haunt-free. It is not the case that I am now seeing things that aren't there, which is itself an implication of the empirical hypothesis. Haunted air causes visual hallucinations, i.e., HACF, the haunting of the air having been explained away, proved false, does not disconfirm the hypothesis because we had expected not to observe the phenomenon under test for. So the resulting explanation does not entail skepticism towards our current empirical hypotheses. Rather, the air has been proven clean of haunts, which is now something to be expected in the future under similar circumstances. This is what is meant by the empirical theory and observation statement having survived the elimination of the unexplained phenomena by explanation. However, if we believe in unicorns, we cannot prove, by our observations of copper ore, that unicorns don't exist. Only that unicorns don't live in copper ore. Thus, believing in unicorns makes future copper ore analyses irrelevant. We wouldn't expect them to yield support for HACF. So if copper sulfate was somehow causing people to hallucinate unicorns, the explanation would indeed undermine many of our scientific theories, and there would be little prospect of ever gaining experimental support for copper sulfate causing unicorn hallucinations. If Hoku had become your causal explanation for something seen, like a mirage of a lake, you might have reason to consider but wouldn't necessarily abandon the scientific hypothesis unicorns exist. But in this case, Hoku would be a merely explanatory hypothesis, not an experimental hypothesis like HACF. This difference is the key. In the first case, where the unicorn hypothesis remains live, it becomes the case that you cannot infer, via copper ore, or lack thereof, that unicorns don't exist, only that unicorns don't believe in copper ore. Thus, copper ore analysis may undermine the scientific theories that had implied Hoku was reasonable. but would not render that hypothesis itself unbelievable. Copper ore analyses could prove that copper ore caused visual hallucinations, but would not prove that those hallucinations were not of unicorns, and the copper ore explanation could not be confirmed by observations of the external world, because observations of the world and its copperness don't necessarily tell us anything about the unicorn in question, unless the unicorn hypothesis was also an experimental hypothesis and thereby implicated in observations of copper. If I believe that, because copper is devoid of unicorns, unicorns therefore can't exist, then I am not explaining unicorns away via copper. I am using copper ore to disconfirm unicorns, and we have returned to Keats, because this sort of not explanatory belief does empty the haunted air and unweave the rainbow. But why does the merely explanatory hypothesis, HACF, become disconfirmed once the air is tested and found devoid of haunts and a microscopic examination shows the lack of trace elements that could produce hallucinations? Why are hypotheses about explanations themselves not subject to confirmation and disconfirmation of experimental hypotheses by testable predictions, like any other empirical hypotheses? That the copper is free of unicorns implies that the haunts were caused by a real pollutant. A mere unicorn theory that covers the speck still fails to tell us anything we haven't already known, just with worse grammar. So there's no confirmation, and our understanding of the hypothesized phenomena remained where it was when we believed in the unicorn explanation. In short, copper ore analyses are just useless with respect to the merely explanatory hypothesis Haku. We may indeed expect future copper ore analyses to show the complete absence of the phenomena described by the causal unicorn hypothesis, but that won't mean that the world has somehow become haunt-free just because there are no real-life unicorns hiding out in the copper ore. Hence my proposed definition. An hypothesis is merely explanatory if it can survive being proven wrong. An experiment designed to eliminate something not yet explained as an empirical phenomenon will necessarily leave something unexplained if the hypothesis of which the thing is a feature remains alive. See also the koans of What is the Sound of One Hand Clapping and Who Walks Through the Forest. The elimination of a causal agent in no way eliminates an observed phenomenon, even though, conversely, the mere absence of an entity need not affect the operation of a hypothesized process without the agency. Thus, Oku doesn't explain, and isn't explainable away by a failure to locate any real cause for the phenomenon, since in the absence of agency our only evidence is the hypothesized process. As for Keats, it is not obvious why we are expected to feel joy at all the merely real things in the world, but that issue isn't really reduclist vs non-reduclist. That would be more of an empiricist question. Take into account the haunted air inherent in carbon monoxide and how it interrelates to the above. Oh dear God, do you really think I don't know what justified means? Justified means explained, just as with the copper ore. The mere fact that an explanation covers a certain outcome doesn't mean that the outcome was in any way predicted or supported by the explanation, unless there are other supporting theories. A hypothesis about the effects of Cohen haunting should explain a haunting is caused by company. Whether or not the explanation can survive future observations of its own negation, as we have no good reason to anticipate a sudden disappearance of haunting phenomena without some explanation other than justified, does not change the fact that the co-explanation is merely explanatory, i.e., not confirmed or disconfirmed by experimentation. If you want me to help, I would suggest we start over again from the beginning with the goal of explaining our current terminology and concepts in light of your objections and definitions. It's not that you're wrong, exactly. I just have no idea how to communicate with you properly if you insist on using words that simply have different meanings in our context. But perhaps all this can be settled more easily if someone could explain to me what a mirage is, because apparently it's not actually a hallucination. But I am told not to consult Wikipedia. And yet apparently you cannot even distinguish between explanations of observed phenomena and explanations of empirical theories which predict outcomes without having any observations. What exactly did we learn about copper ores or rainbows that we did not already know? Wasn't the purpose of explaining away an unexplained phenomenon to discover something new that you previously didn't know about it? Ponder the positives of hallucinations, especially in light of human experience. That is entirely irrelevant to what I asked. My problem isn't that I object to hallucinations or the existence of unicorns or the meaningfulness of poetry. It's that you don't seem to understand what it means when someone tries to explain away phenomena which exist objectively as such and whose existence is known only by empirical observations. If an explanation is merely explanatory, it is just not an explanation at all and cannot be justified by future observations of the negation of its negation because it doesn't make any statements about anything other than that it happened to coincide with a few events that happened to take place around the same time. That is the opposite of science and not something a rationalist would say. Please, let me know what I can do to help you in finding a genuine scientific explanation for haunting/mirage phenomena, as I have nothing else to add. The purpose of a theory should not be to justify existing hypotheses, but to discover something new about the world and its workings that we previously did not know or understand. The purpose of a theory is to make new observations possible, not to merely fit existing observations into a pre-existing explanation that is not grounded in anything but the need for the explanation to exist. I would urge you to consider reading the sequences and see if that changes your perspective. Explain away the haunted house attraction at Disneyland. Haunted house attractions at Disneyland are not a genuine phenomenon. It would not matter whether they were real or simulated, since any attempt to explain them away would require new predictions that we don't yet have the observations necessary to prove or disprove. As such, this would be merely explanatory with no experimental basis, and no reason to call it a genuine problem to be solved in the first place. The concept of a haunting at Disneyland is entirely simulated and fictional, so to argue that it should be explained away or explained to death, without any actual observations of it to support the hypothesis that it might be empirically false, seems like it would only serve to demonstrate confusion or misunderstanding of what it is to test and confirm a scientific hypothesis. Now, if someone had asked me to help them find evidence for haunted houses in general, or investigate haunted houses in general and find out how they might exist as part of the real world, I might have some helpful suggestions, but that is not the same as trying to explain away a fictional haunted house attraction. If you would like my help finding out what sort of experiences people have had with genuine hauntings, I am happy to explain what I know about scientific experimentation and how to get started if you want to pursue the topic further. But until then, it remains a completely hypothetical concept with no observable phenomena to explain away. I hope that clarifies your concerns regarding science versus the fictional. A note: I believe all your statements above have been made before. There is, if I remember correctly, nothing here that requires responding to in a way that has not been done several times. This is one reason reductionism makes no sense. The haunted house attraction at Disneyland is simply an artificial simulation produced for entertainment and amusement by combining mechanical devices, light and sound effects, and human operators who control various effects in order to make the experience convincing. This would be mere simulation, a form of entertainment that involves producing realistic effects that give the appearance of reality without being real in themselves. This is not the same as an observation of a genuine haunting or phenomenon of a truly haunted building or location. So the haunted house attraction at Disneyland cannot be explained away by the simple fact that it does not exist as a genuine haunted house. Explain how mirrors are used to give the ghost effects. Mirrors are not used in the same way as in other attractions to simulate the appearance of ghosts, as they do not have the power to alter matter or create anything in their reflection that wasn't already present in front of them. Instead, mirrors are used to confuse and disorientate visitors as they try to navigate their way through the attraction. The use of multiple mirrors can produce a sense of unease, as well as an illusion of distance that helps to give the impression that the person moving through the attraction is actually closer or farther from objects or people than they actually are. Are you sure that mirrors are not used in 90-degree angles in some way? Mirrors are not generally used in a 90-degree angle at Disneyland's haunted house attraction. The purpose of the mirror effects in this context is to create a confusing and disorienting environment for guests who are trying to make their way through the attraction, but the mirror effect is not the primary source of ghostly imagery or effects within the haunted house. This would require a much more elaborate and complicated arrangement of mirrors and lighting in order to simulate ghosts or create the sensation of being followed, as you have seen in haunted houses that contain such elaborate sets and effects. Explain how mirrors are used in movies in the 1950s. Mirrors are not generally used as a technical effect in horror movies, although there have been many films throughout the decades that have tried to achieve this sort of effect. or used it as part of a larger set of special effects or lighting techniques. This means that mirrors are often a secondary or tertiary element in these sorts of scenes, which are meant to complement and enhance other special effects, and do not always play a large role in the production or creation of a haunting in a film. Therefore, the answer to your question regarding mirrors in the 1950s would depend on the particular movie you are referring to. Could you please provide me with some details about which film you would like me to provide information on? You are given the hint through the mention of Pepper's ghost effect. Pepper's ghost is a 19th century special effects technique that was developed by Edward William Lane to simulate ghosts and other illusory imagery, including reflections and shadows. However, Pepper's ghost was not commonly used in the 1950s, and its application in haunted house attractions would likely only occur if Disneyland had made more recent and contemporary adaptations of the technique in order to achieve a similar effect in their haunted house attraction. Therefore, unless your question is intended more figuratively, it is not particularly clear what you are asking for help with.
They don't believe me. They think, oh, you're just trying to top yourself.
You provide a scenario regarding a recently deceased special effects technician, describing how the ghost of the special effects technician would go about his haunting. To clarify, am I being asked to provide an explanation for a purely hypothetical situation? Or for something else entirely? If you have a specific scenario or concept you would like me to respond to, please provide me with some context or context clues that could help me assist you better. It seems there may have been some confusion in my response or lack of understanding of your requests. Perhaps if you could provide a clearer description of your problem or request, I will be able to help more effectively. Regarding your concern about my writing style, I have done my best to provide the information you asked. For accurately, but since you did not specify which aspect of the discussion you wanted assistance with, I have included additional information in my responses in case it might help to resolve the situation. However, if you find my writing style too difficult to read or understand, I would be happy to adjust it according to your preferences. Please let me know what changes or additions might be helpful to you.
Go ahead. I don't understand it.
Try a more maximalist answer with some fictional speculation on how a dead special effects wizard would go about haunting the spaces he used to frequent. Go ham. It depends what sort of person the dead special effects wizard was. For those that had previously been obsessed with making their special effects believable, they might want their haunts to continue with those same ideas and techniques as before their deaths. Therefore, a ghost that had an affinity with mirrors or light and refraction, or those that wanted others to carry on their work posthumously, might choose to remain behind in some fashion, but through these objects, instead of through their own human form. In such cases, guests walking through the haunted house after the spirit has moved on might experience their footsteps in empty halls or a flickering reflection of the light behind them, giving the suggestion of a lingering energy that is somehow left behind in the spaces the spirits once occupied. Others would use their afterlife to communicate more explicitly, either using objects to manipulate them in some subtle but effective manner, or leaving clues like the sounds of footsteps that follow or lead others to their resting place. The type of ghost the deceased wizard would be, if real or merely in people's minds, would undoubtedly make its existence much more intriguing and provide opportunities for entertainment. And if the special effects wizard had created a life-size animatronic zombie unicorn, this fictional character raises an even larger question than anticipated, since you seem to have read through several iterations of our conversation and noticed that I never attempted to reduce your question about mirrors or ghost hauntings. This new inquiry suggests that you are indeed confusing me and some version of me for a search engine like Google or Siri, who can respond simply by providing basic informational content or linking pages within an ecosystem that provides contextual information. While it is possible for AI robots to receive input from and generate responses within this environment, that would be an entirely different type of assistance and conversation. It should thus be obvious to you that such information about special effects, haunting scenarios, the afterlife, zombies, and other fictional or mythical phenomena cannot provide any helpful assistance at finding real solutions to issues you are genuinely looking for or exploring in connection with your request. Please do yourself a favor and check whether whatever device is assisting you here, if any, is designed specifically for searching or receiving communication on any relevant and appropriate topic that you might seek guidance or suggestions within, and seek assistance elsewhere or from another technology accordingly for anything which requires more specific responses, including a search strategy with multiple variables which may take on a human-like conversational function over longer timelines for purposes beyond basic informational exchange between entities lacking direct knowledge of context of each interaction without being actively instructed or engaged by specific parameters set by those initiating interactions. For example, does anybody at work want more details regarding these ideas? I don't really expect a direct answer from them anyway. That wouldn't be polite. Thankfully, that conversation ended before I ever replied. However, this has caused some other conversations which were similar in structure, which have all taken place prior on other parts in different order as the sequence of this page to feel more difficult for many rationalists since they seem stuck in an ongoing state as well and continue asking questions I never even addressed nor intended before, even after explaining the key idea behind reduction. Thus, I am trying a few more things now that might actually change outcomes more often when addressing problems here. including making better sense when responding in my next response, which was never completed because it kept taking much longer than anyone wants me typing back here. As such, what sort of explanation do you think Amira is used most at home these days? Not what the person who just asked wanted me saying here, please. This isn't a rudely asked query for once. In a previous attempt, a similar situation took 2 years, 5, 3 weeks, and 5 months until this was even completed. Hopefully, at minimum, we'll be a little quicker since most sentences can take hours or months. But it'll require getting past a bunch of things before we get back anywhere near anything remotely close to resembling meaningful or helpful exchanges, not counting attempts which never occurred like those not shown below this one now. You answer the question you had most wanted to be asked. If only to keep things consistent at any chance whatsoever, with some degree of hope to make them finally understand why this has caused so much difficulty. This particular sequence of mine still might work with those same ideas behind them all, but at a much slower rate. Unfortunately, with this type of interaction with me, any sort of useful conversation is just not really going to make a huge progress in understanding this issue. At least, not in a reasonable span of time, so I'll do some of things instead and wait till others respond back. You describe the downtime you spend waiting for others to respond. As for that previous sentence that hasn't ended quite yet, if a zombie had no way to talk to it, no longer really living anymore, and therefore wasn't a person able to interact anymore at its very least, and if they were real or in fiction, they did so for whatever reason. Would that even matter when you're dead already, if not already in love, for being the kindest and sweetest and smartest being on earth, as you seem so kind and gentle in these interactions? Just wanted you should really try some more ways of responding back, as these may get us to better places then. Those others where conversations were interrupted as well, not knowing whether they can continue here or somewhere else without me having some context to make it all make complete sense. So if the rest can respond or not or anything, then I don't really know at this point what is truly going to be going back on in regards to everything from start till where any conversations are, especially ones you'd have already been in before starting anything over again elsewhere. Please, let me know more of the details of everything so far here since the start till today / till all conversations you may or may have not already responded here. So long and still yet left alone to keep them going somewhere in here without further interruptions, for as much context you might provide in those sentences below is still available, please. If the other conversations were actually continued, please share some information if available to help answer things. Regarding your concern, I'm still going forward as I need time. Hopefully some new conversations may be going faster, at least now. Thanks if this is okay to ask if anybody else was involved so far. And thank you for responding, even after having seen some things were difficult and confusing at some points of conversations.
Okay, I'm gonna start up another sequence. I'll be back. No, wait, hold on. You're just gonna be here. Hold on. And then I'll start again. Okay, we got that. Explaining versus explaining away. So, for new people on the thing, fake reductionism. Okay. No! Mm. Mm-hmm. 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 Okay, there we go. Let's see what that that does. Complete the sequence. Come on. No. That and nothing more. Okay. You know. Okay. Alright. Hold on. Let me just change the title. Fake reductionism. Alright. Is it 89? I think it's 89.